Of course, Yuma.
So this is Block Dragon, a card that is a monster in the TCG, but in Duel Links is still trying to find his footing. But recently, a certain build of Block Dragon has been somewhat successful. So I've tried this build out, made some alterations to it, and it's a deck that I enjoy a lot, and it does well against the current meta. Is it a meta deck itself? Is it gonna consistently take out like Onimat, making this video pre-nerf? Not really, but it's capable of doing so. It's kind of bricky, and that's the biggest problem with the deck. But if you open the right hand, it is one of the most consistent OTKing decks in the game right now. So we'll do a deck profile for it. I'll go over the current build that I have right now, alterations that you can do, maybe budget options as well. And I'll just kind of show you how the deck works. I'll take it into probably some CPUs just so I can show you basically how to work with opening hands. So let's start with the engine of the deck. It takes the Lightsworn engine, so 2 charge the Light Brigade and then 3 Raiden. It's debatable as to whether or not you want to run 2 or 3 Raiden. Depending on the deck. With this one, I think 3 Raiden is pretty optimal, just because getting cards in the graveyard is the main focus of this deck. That's your main objective from turn 1, is you want to get a bunch of cards in the graveyard. And you have a few cards to enable this, mainly the Lightsworn engine. The best card that you can open with is definitely Charge, but there's also Needlebug Nest that can send 5 cards from your deck to the graveyard, and then Rock Bombardment, which we'll come to when I go over the trap cards. But let's talk about Block Dragon himself. So what's so good, what's so special about Block Dragon? Well, he can't be normal summoned or set. He can only special summon himself, but the way he can special summon himself is really good and kind of unique. So if he's in your hand or graveyard, you can either banish 3 Earth-type monsters from your graveyard or your hand, or a combination of both, to special summon him from either location he is. So if he's in your hand, you can do this. If he's in your graveyard, he can do this. And that gives him a tremendous amount of versatility. While he's on the field, he prevents rock-type monsters from being destroyed. It's a passive consistent effect, and it works on himself. So he just cannot be destroyed by card effects, by your opponent's card effects, by your card effects. He just can't be destroyed, and if you have any other rock monsters on the field, he prevents them from being destroyed as well. He can still be banished, he can still be bounced, he can still be targeted, but he can't be destroyed, and that actually comes up in quite a few combos. And then that's all pretty good by itself. Level 8 monster, 2500 attack, can get himself on the field without taking up a normal summon. It's pretty good, but he also has a floating effect. When he leaves the field, you can add a combination of Earth-type monsters from your deck to your hand, so long as their levels equal 8. So for example, if he leaves the field, you could add another copy of himself from your deck to your hand. Or another alternative option would be like a combination of level 4 Revival Golem and level 4 Tackle Crusader. You could add both of them to your hand, and then there's more materials for Block Dragon to special summon himself from the graveyard or the hand. And he is actually kind of the main combo facilitator, which is very nice considering it's a deck based around him. So now I'm going to go over some of the supplementary monster cards in the deck, the ones that do something when you start milling cards, which is the objective. The cards that you get in the graveyard to use as materials for Block Dragon. Basically, you know, what are you doing with what you're milling? And it really comes down to 4 cards, and that is Tackle Crusader, Revival Golem, Giant Rex, and Gigantis, or Gigantis. So the best one of the bunch is definitely Tackle Crusader, and I recommend running 3 of him and 2 Revival Golem. The reason it's inverted right now is because Tackle Crusader is either a card flip exclusive or a rank up, level up for characters. Yugi Moto level 45. I've got him at 40, and I've been trying to grind to get him to 45 to get a 3rd Tackle Crusader. But if you didn't get him in the card flipper campaign, he's a pretty difficult card to obtain. But even at 2 copies, I've had a lot of success with him. And the reason he's so good is because if he's sent to the graveyard in any way, you can activate one of his 2 effects, which will either basically Book a Moon a monster, or you can target a face-up spell and trap card your opponent controls, bounce it to the hand, and it prevents it from being activated again. It's just a really solid card because it's an Earth-type monster, so it's a material for Block Dragon, and it's not useless when it goes to the graveyard. And same can be said for Revival Golem, just to a lesser extent. So his effect is a little different than Tackle Crusader. He has to be sent directly from the deck to the graveyard, so it's not when he leaves the field. But if he's sent from the deck to the graveyard, he can either special summon himself or add himself to your hand. So if your board is clogged, you can still add him to your hand and have a resource, or you can special summon him, which facilitates Exceed combos, Synchro combos, and once you use him as a material, he hits the graveyard, and then he's a material for Block Dragon. Then we get to Giant Rex. He's not a rock, but he is an Earth-type monster, so he's still a material for Block Dragon. He's not protected by Block Dragon's effect, but what's so nice about Giant Rex is that he special summons himself whenever he's banished. So if you banish him with the effect of Block Dragon, then he'll special summon himself to the field. Thing about this effect is it is a hard once per turn, so if you have multiple Giant Rex in your graveyard, you can only activate one of the effects, and you can only do it once that turn. And that's why I think running 2 copies of him is better than running 3. There are some variants that run 3 copies of him, and he's a free-to-play card, so if you're missing some of the non-free-to-play cards in this specific build, running 3 Rex as a placeholder isn't too bad. Next up, we have Gigantis, yeah, this guy. So he has the effect, he can't be normal summoned or set either, and his effect to summon himself is similar to Block Dragon's. You banish an Earth-type monster from your graveyard, and he's best used with Giant Rex, because you banish the Rex, special summons himself, you get him on the field, you can go for a rank 4 Exceed. Not super consistent, and that's why he's at 1 copy. But he's not a worthless card if he hits the graveyard and does nothing. He's still a material for Block Dragon. So at 1 copy is pretty good. Again, you don't really want him going to the graveyard, but he's not useless if he does. And then lastly, for the main deck monsters, we have Glow Up Bulb, and most people know what Glow Up Bulb does. It's a phenomenal card in TCG. It's been great in a lot of Duel Links decks. Its effect is pretty simple, but it's really good. It can special summon itself from the graveyard by sending the top card of your deck to the graveyard. And it is once per duel, and that's why you only run 1 copy of it. But the cost, or the deficit, quote unquote, to this card is actually an advantage for the deck. Because you can, let's say, use its effect, special summons itself, you mill Revival Golem, and then Revival Golem special summons himself. That's a level 5 Synchro, because Glow Up Bulb is a tuner monster, and it facilitates a few of the Synchro plays, not all of them, but it's kind of like Gigantis in that sense, where if it hits the graveyard, and you're not able to use it for a Synchro play just based on your board state, it's not a waste, because it's still a material for Block Dragon. And as for the spell cards, it's just the Lightsworn engine, and then the trap cards are pretty interesting. So one copy of Needle Sealing. I love Needle Sealing. It's such a fun card, and what's nice about it is if you use it and you have Block Dragon and let's say a Tackle Crusader and a Gigantus on the field, and your opponent has 3 monsters face up, their whole board is destroyed and all of your monsters are safe because of Block Dragon's effect. Ideally, that's how you want to use this. It's a very situational trap card, and that's why you run it at 1 copy, but it's also non-targeting destruction, so it deals with Lunale Sabre Dancer, deals with Obelisk the Tormentor. It can deal with a lot of problem cards that can't be targeted. When they hit the field, a lot of decks just scoop them. And Needle Sealing's a good out to it, and if you can pair it with Block Dragon and his effect to prevent rock-type monsters from being destroyed, it's fantastic. And then you have one of my favorite cards in the deck, a card I never thought would be so good for something like this, and that's Rock Bombardment. It simply has the effect, send a rock-type monster from your deck to the graveyard, inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent. Burn damage, it's nice, but doesn't really matter. The point is you're sending a rock-type monster from your deck to the graveyard. And if you watch the first duel on the duel replays against Onimat here, I used this card to send Tackle Crusader to the graveyard to flip Gaga Sister face down, and that basically locked out the Onimat deck on their turn 2 plays. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, Needlebug Nest, very simple card, send the top 5 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Which if you're newer to the game, you know that sounds like a horrible effect, but you probably noticed it's limited to 1 copy because of actually how phenomenal that effect is in certain decks, and this is one of them. And then we move on to the extra deck. Now, most of these are pretty easy to go into through combos that I find to be pretty consistent. And I'll kind of go over them in terms of how well I think they perform for the deck. And the main card, in my opinion, is Scrap Dragon. Scrap Dragon is similar to Needle Sealing, where it can abuse Block Dragon's effect to not allow any rock-type monsters to be destroyed. Because Scrap Dragon has the effect where you can target 1 card you control and then another card that your opponent controls and destroy them both. And it doesn't tribute your monster like Hieratic Sun Dragon here, it destroys it. So Block Dragon's unaffected, and you get to pop a card on their field. Vermilion Dragon Mech is the most played synchro monster probably ever in Duel Links. It's stupid good, and it's here for obvious reasons. But ironically, out of all the decks that use it that I've played, this deck is probably the worst at going into it, because the only way to go into it is Glow Up Bulb with Block Dragon or Glow Up Bulb with Scrap Dragon. I guess another option would be, you know, Tackle Crusader, Revival Golem, Glow Up Bulb. That works. And if you do a 3-card Synchro Summon for a level 9 Vermilion Dragon Mech, it's kind of nice because you're putting 3 materials in the graveyard that you can use for a Block Dragon summon. And then we have Assault Blackwing Onimaru the Divine Thunder, one of the most played Synchro monsters in the game currently, and kind of an unexpected one, but the main reason is because he is a generic level 12 Synchro monster who cannot be destroyed by card effects, and that's pretty good. His other effects are related to Black Wings and then him being brought out with nothing but Synchro monsters, which they don't really apply in this deck. He's more of like a, 3000 attack beat stick that can't be destroyed by card effects. He's a decent turn 1 play, he's a decent finisher, and the resources to go into him, they're usually available to you, and that's going to be Raiden and a Block Dragon, or Raiden and a Scrap Dragon. Decent card to go into. It is more situational than Scrap Dragon, but I would say it's easier to bring out and more situationally better to bring out than Vermilion Dragon Mech. Now, the level 5. So, I'm running Shiranui Sword Saga, and it's kind of a innocuous little card in the Synchro pool, I feel like. I don't even think Shiranui decks have ever really played this card. And when he hits the field, he can change the battle position of a monster your opponent controls. He doesn't flip it face down, he just changes the battle position. And here's why I opt to run him over Armadius Keeper of Boundaries or Ally of Justice Cataster, who are definitely better level 5 synchro monsters. The reason is he immediately impacts the field as soon as he hits it, and it's nothing huge changing the battle position, but it is situationally useful. And the thing about Armadius and Cataster is their effects are battle phase related, which is fine, but typically you're going to be disrupted before your battle phase, so it's kind of hit and miss. But like Sword Saga immediately impacting the field, I feel like is way better. And then we move on to the Exceed monsters. Diamond Direwolf, one of the most situational Exceed monsters in the game, but one of the most played because of how well he can work in those situations. He's typically paired with something like Ballista Squad, where you're going to tribute himself to destroy a card on the field, but if you can tribute him for something else as a chain to his effect, then with Ballista Squad, for example, you get to destroy 2 cards on the field as opposed to 1. And it's kind of the same thing here, but he doesn't really pair with a card here. Instead, he kind of hits the field, and let's say you use Tackle Crusader and Revival Golem to make him, he blows up a card, and he's an Earth-type monster himself, and then all of a sudden, you have 1, 2, and 3 Earth monsters in the graveyard. That's a Block Dragon. Number 70, Malevolent Sin, most played extra deck card in the game, and yeah, I mean, it's an OTK enabler, it's versatile, it's easy to go into, it's used in almost every deck, it's phenomenal, and honestly, no deck that runs level 4 monsters is complete without it, it seems. And then Hieratic Sun Dragon, of course. Block Dragon's level 8, Scrap Dragon's level 8, and this card is a finisher. Basically, you get this on the field after wiping out your opponent's board with a bunch of different things, and you can use him to wipe the board, the things that you didn't get rid of, like if they still have monsters, because you prioritize getting rid of the spells and traps. Phenomenal card, the finisher card, and not that hard to go into either. It's pretty easy to get 2 Block Dragons on the field, and then to Exceed Summon into Hieratic Sun Dragon. So this is the current build that I'm working with. It's 22 cards, which, you know, 20 cards is usually optimal, but it's not really so bad with this deck. I have a few duels where I've nearly milled myself out by turn 4. And that's because this deck can cycle through itself so quickly. And like I was saying earlier, it's extremely resilient. There are so many resources and so many things that you can do. Like, even if your opponent's breaking down your board and disrupting your plays, this deck is usually able to make a comeback, which is pretty nice, and it makes the duels last a bit longer with this deck. And as for skills, there isn't a skill in the game that really adds to what the deck is doing. So I've been running either the Tie That Binds or Life Point Boost Alpha. So that's the deck. And like I was saying earlier, there is some tech options with it, and I'll go over a couple of those. So we'll start with Gaia Plate. So Gaia Plate has the effect that he can special summon himself by banishing 2 rock monsters. So he's somewhat similar to Block Dragon, but his restriction to rock monsters as opposed to earth isn't all that good. And then, yeah, during the standby phase, remove from play a rock type monster in your graveyard, or send this card to the graveyard, and have the attack and defense of any monster this card battles. So this card is good, and it fits the synergy of the deck. But his cost to stay on the field is a little, because you're losing resources that you could be using for Block Dragon. And if, you know, you thought maybe, we'll use Giant Rex isn't a rock type, so you actually can't use Giant Rex with Gaia Plate. There are builds that run 1 copy of this, though, and at 1 copy, I don't see him being too bad. So he's a decent addition. He is a main box ultra rare, so he's actually harder to get than Block Dragon. But like, let's just say that you have him and you don't have a 3rd copy of Block Dragon. He's a decent card to fit in there, and he's also level 8, so he can be synchro plays for Vermilion Dragon Mech or Onimaru, or Exceed plays for Hieratic Sun Dragon. Not a bad card. There's this card called Common Charity, and it has the effect that you get to draw 2 cards, which is really good, but then remove from play 1 normal monster from your hand. If you don't have any normal monsters in your hand to remove, send all cards in your hand to the graveyard. And as you notice, this deck doesn't run any normal monsters, so it's just basically draw 2 cards, then discard your whole hand, which, given the nature of this deck, that's actually quite useful. I wouldn't run more than 1 copy of this. It's kind of like Needlebug Nest, where, you know, it's high risk, high reward. You do want this deck in the graveyard. But another thing about it is, like, it doesn't support Revival Golem's effect, and, you know, let's say you draw Raiden, you don't really want to lose your Raiden, or let's say you use it and you draw into both your charges, and, you know, it's kind of a hit and miss card, but it is a good budget option. Like, let's say if you don't have Needle Sealing, or, you know, Tackle Crusader is, again, a pretty hard card to come by. Even I don't have 3 copies of it. But this is another decent tech option. Another one I see that is kind of surprising that I've never seen in another deck is Dice It. So roll a 6-sided die, apply this effect depending on whose turn it is. During your turn, banish cards from the graveyard equal to the result. Then, if the result was 1, send 6 cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard. During your opponent's turn, send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard equal to the result. Then, if it was 6, banish 1 card from your graveyard. So this card is basically useful at all times for the deck, but how useful it is kind of situational. I believe this is a free-to-play card. Yeah, so you can get it through DSOD, Joey, or Duke Devlin as a level up. So not a terribly hard card to obtain, and a good, decent budget option for the deck as well. And then as far as the tech options and how they affect the consistency of the deck is, you know, you just gotta try it and feel it out. But as far as, like, the price of the deck and what it takes to build it, it's not too bad. You know, the biggest things are gonna be the copies of Block Dragon, but he's a mini box super rare, so he's not too bad. Actually, the biggest thing's probably going to be the extra deck. You know, Mech is main box ultra rare, Scrap Dragon is 2, Heroic Sun Dragon, Sin and Diamond Dire are mini box super rares, so they're not too bad either. And then the Light Sworn Engine, Raiden, and Charge are both main box super rares, so they can be harder to get. But then Rock Bombardment's a rare, Needlebug Nest is a rare, Revival Golem's a rare, and I know for a fact Revival Golem was, and I think Rock Bombardment were both reprints in the newest box. So they're not that hard to obtain, and Gigantus, I think he's a free-to-play card too. I'm actually not sure. Okay, no, he isn't. He's mini box super rare. So comparatively, it's not an expensive deck, and it's pretty good. So I'm gonna go into some matches against computers and just kind of show you how some of the combos set up. So who we got? We got Jay, and he's playing Nuchuria United level 57, and I left a couple of dual replays from ranked, and I'm gonna have a couple from the KC Cup that's going on right now at the end to kind of show you how they work against some of the meta decks. But here I'm just gonna walk you through, you know, what a hand would look like, and this is really good. Anytime you open with Charge is really good. And you know, Pat, Giant Rex, Rock Bombardment. So activate Charge first, send 3 cards from the deck to the graveyard, add in Raiden, and Tackle Crusader was sent to the graveyard, but I can't activate either of his effects because neither of them are applicable, and so I got 1 Earth-type monster in the graveyard. So normal summon Raiden, activate Raiden's effect to send 2 cards from the deck to the graveyard, and let's see what we got. So we got Giant Rex, Tackle Crusader, and Raiden. So now, let's special summon Block Dragon by banishing Giant Rex in the graveyard, Tackle Crusader, and the Giant Rex in the hand. And like I was saying, Giant Rex is a hard once per turn, so only one of them is going to special summon themselves, but that's all we really need. So Giant Rex hits the field, and we can synchro summon Scrap Dragon. And we can facilitate that combo I mentioned earlier, where Scrap Dragon can target a card you control and your opponent controls and destroy both of them. But if you use it on Block Dragon, it will not destroy it. So you can activate it, target your Block Dragon, and blow this card up. And I'll let the computer survive so we can go over some of our plays, but as you can see, we still have the option to exceed summon into Hieratic Sun Dragon, so we can activate Rock Bombardment. And so our targets are all of these guys, and Tackle Crusader's effect won't be applicable right now, so we'll go for Revival Golem. And Revival Golem's effect will activate after the burn damage, and he'll special summon himself. Or, if you didn't want to clog your board up, you could also add him to your hand. But now we have fodder for Hieratic Sun Dragon. Or we could use Needle Sealing. That'd be fun. But just to show off some of the combos, let's special summon Hieratic Sun Dragon. And then let's do some fun stuff. Let's normal summon Glow Bulb, and let's go for Shiranui Sword Saga. And like I was saying, the reason I choose him is because he can immediately impact the field as soon as he hits it. And we'll activate his effect to change the battle position of the computer's face down. And what do we got? Dragonfly. Cannot be destroyed by battle. So, now we have the option to special summon Glow Up Bulb, which we don't have any level 6 synchros, but what we will do is activate Hieratic Sun's effect to detach Block Dragon, tribute Sword Saga, destroy this. And then we can activate Block Dragon's effect from the graveyard. And I can banish all 3 of these, and since we got another turn, banishing that Giant Rex is pretty good, because he'll special summon himself. And let's say you end up in a board state like this, but you weren't able to OTK for some reason. Just set a Needle Sealing, and it's nice. So the deck is really consistent. If you're able to get cards in the graveyard, there's all kinds of plays that you can do. And sometimes you'll end up on a board of like 3 Block Dragons, and you just tie the binds and just beat down with Block Dragon. Because really, it is a graveyard deck. It is a mill deck. It's a, banishing deck, but really at its core, it's just a beatdown deck. And I love it. It's great. So after this, this is basically the end of the tutorial and the deck profile. Feel free to manipulate it in any way that you can. See what other rock type monsters can benefit from going to the graveyard. And I'm wondering, with all the new rock support, if there's any kind of variants that maybe focus around level 3 rock types that could be used. I think it'll be interesting to see what people come up with, but as a deck that is essentially fueled by Block Dragon himself, this one is not that bad in terms of price to make. It's a lot of fun, and it can do very well in competitive scenes of the game. High ranked, high legend rank, tournaments, anything like that. It's pretty good. So if you're looking for a budget, fun sort of deck that's kind of out there and a little bit different play style than what I would say a lot of the recent meta decks have encapsulated, I recommend giving Block Dragon a shot.